In the beginning, love feels like a clear, sunlit room. It is a state of grace built on a foundation of beautiful naivete. You enter with a heart unburdened by suspicion, where every word is taken at face value, every gesture is seen as a pure token of affection, and every promise feels like a covenant carved in stone. This is the era of blind faith, where you operate under the most sacred assumption that a woman's love is an unconditional force, as steady and eternal as the North Star. It is a pure, unguarded affection, given freely because you believe it is rooted in something unshakable, a loyalty to your essence and a connection built on reason. You love not just the woman, but the perfect, sacred story you believe you are both writing together. This simplicity is the very magic of it all. Love is not a puzzle to be solved, but a truth to be lived. The first cracks in this foundation are often subtle, almost imperceptible. A promise made in passion is forgotten in the calm of the next day. A gesture of devotion is followed by a sudden, inexplicable coldness. You begin to notice that her actions are not always guided by the steadfast logic you assumed, but by something more fluid and unpredictable, the shifting tides of her emotions and deep-seated subconscious instincts. What you once interpreted as a reasoned decision now appears as a reaction to a feeling that can change with the weather. This initial realization feels less like an observation and more like a betrayal. The narrative of unconditional, eternal love you had built in your mind starts to crumble, and with it, the identity you had as the hero of that story, the true. Cutting insight comes when you see the mechanism of her attraction clearly. It is often not anchored to your core self, your inherent worth, but to your performance. Her love is tied to how well you maintain the frame, the energy of strength, the allure of mystery, the spark of challenge that keeps her emotionally invested. When you falter, when you reveal too much vulnerability in a way that feels like neediness, or when you lose that essential polarity, her affection doesn't simply dim. It can vanish as if it were never there. This is the truth that cuts the deepest. She was never in love with you in the way you imagined. She was in love with the way you made her feel. The person was secondary to the experience. And so, the purity of that blind affection is irrevocably replaced by a cautious, weary awareness. You no longer love with the blissful ignorance of a child. You love with the eyes of a watchman, wide open and seeing the fragile strings that make the puppet move. This fundamental shift makes love feel heavier, more complicated, and its enchanting spell is broken forever. The sunlit room has grown shadows. You can never unsee them. With the initial shattering of innocence comes a new and permanent state, the burden of awareness. This is not a fleeting disillusionment, but a fundamental shift in perception that colors every interaction. Where once you saw a unified intention, you now see a landscape of contradictions. A woman says she desires stability and safety, a calm harbor in the storm of life, yet her attention is magnetically drawn to the thrill of unpredictability and the man who embodies it. She professes to want a partner who is in touch with his emotions, who can be vulnerable and open. Yet you observe her respect and attraction wane when that vulnerability is presented not as strength, but as neediness. She values the security of commitment, yet her gaze lingers on the excitement of danger, the allure of what lies beyond the fence of the familiar. These are not lies, she tells you, but rather the conflicting impulses of a nature she may not fully understand. Herself, navigating this terrain transforms the act of love. Dada, from a spontaneous expression into a deliberate and exhausting strategy. It becomes a constant tightrope walk, a performance where the margin for error is terrifyingly slim. You are constantly calibrating. Am I giving enough affection, or too much, tipping from desirable into desperate? Am I being available enough to provide security, or so available that I become mundane and predictable? The goal is to be the stable rock she claims to need, while simultaneously being the exciting storm she secretly craves. This balancing act drains the joy and simplicity from connection. Love is no longer about giving your heart freely. It is about managing impressions, maintaining a frame, and strategically withholding to sustain interest. It feels less like a partnership and more like a high-stakes game where the rules are unwritten and constantly changing. This newfound awareness installs a permanent translator in your mind, one that decodes her words and actions in real time. When she looks at you with sincere eyes and says, "I will love you forever," you can no longer receive it as a simple, eternal truth. You now hear the subtle, more honest subtext. "I love how I feel in this moment, and I desperately want this feeling to last forever." The difference is profound. She is not being deceitful. In that moment, she is utterly sincere. But her sincerity is a prisoner to her emotional state, and that state is as changeable as the wind. You can no longer accept a promise of forever when you understand it is built on the most fragile of foundations, a feeling that is, by its very nature, temporary. This knowledge erodes the innocence of love, not with bitterness, but with a sobering clarity. The unguarded faith you once possessed, the ability to believe in a shared, unshakable future, is now a door that is closed behind you. You can look back at it with nostalgia, but you can never walk through it again. Every expression of affection, no matter how passionate, is now shadowed by the quiet, unspoken understanding of its conditional and fleeting nature, as the veil of romantic idealism drops completely. Your vision sharpens to a sometimes painful clarity, revealing the underlying transactional nature of much female affection. This is not a cynical assumption, but an observed pattern, an instinctual calculus that operates beneath the surface of words and emotions. You begin to see that, consciously or not, a woman often evaluates a man based on a ledger of provisions. These are not always material. They are more often emotional and social. Are you providing enough attention to make her feel valued? Enough security to make her feel safe? Enough status to make her feel proud? Or enough excitement to make her feel alive? When you successfully meet these needs, her desire is the reward. When you falter, when the provision of attention becomes routine, the security feels stagnant, or the excitement wanes. Her attraction doesn't just diminish, can be reallocated to whoever seems to offer a better balance sheet. This realization is devastating because it reframes love from a matter of destiny and profound connection to one of negotiation. In sustained performance, this stark reality is compounded by a societal double standard that you can no longer ignore. Men are culturally conditioned and held to a standard of unwavering consistency. They are expected to be the pillars, the dependable providers of emotional stability, physical security, and logical resolve. Their value is often measured by their reliability. When a woman, however, shifts her feelings, changes her mind, or walks away from the relationship, the narrative surrounding her actions is profoundly different. Her emotional volatility is frequently romanticized. She is following her heart, searching for her truth, or bravely choosing herself. Men are shamed for not stepping up or giving enough, while women are praised for prioritizing their emotional well-being, even if that prioritization comes at the cost of a commitment they once swore was eternal. This imbalance fundamentally poisons the well of mutual respect necessary for a pure partnership. Love begins to feel less like a shared journey and more like a one-sided responsibility. You are expected to be the unmovable rock, the steady anchor, regardless of your own internal storms. While she is granted the freedom to be a ship carried by the currents of her feelings, you find yourself not just in a relationship with her, but in a constant invisible competition. You are competing not only with other men, but with the curated fantasies sold to her by social media, the well-intentioned but often misguided advice of her friends, and the cultural narrative that she deserves a perpetual movie-like passion. This is an unwinnable battle, as you are pitted against an idealized illusion, a highlight reel of romance, and a prince from a fairy tale that no real flawed man can ever consistently embody. The weight of this realization is the understanding that you are being judged not against who you are, but against a fantasy that was never real to begin with. In response to the exhausting performance and the inherent unfairness, a profound transformation begins within you. This is the forging of armor, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. The first and most crucial step is the internal shift where you stop seeking your validation externally. Through the mirror of a woman's love and approval, you consciously decouple your sense of self-worth from her fluctuating affections. Instead, You begin the slow, deliberate work of building a foundation from within, through the integrity of your purpose, the discipline of your habits, your loyalty to your mission, and the respect of your brothers. This shift is profoundly liberating, yet it is also inherently isolating. Women, once seen as the ultimate prize and the source of your completion, are now repositioned in your psyche. They become companions potentially wonderful, but ultimately temporary, conditional, and replaceable additions to a life that is already whole without them. This new perspective allows you to see the predictable, almost mechanical cycle that governs many romantic entanglements. It is a three-act play: idealization, disappointment, and withdrawal. In the beginning, she projects a fantasy onto you, seeing not the complex, flawed man you are, but the image of the hero from her dreams. You are put on a pedestal, and the affection feels intense and real. But this stage is unsustainable. Inevitably, reality intrudes. She sees your human limitations, your moments of weakness, your mundane struggles. The disappointment sets in. The pedestal crumbles. The once adoring gaze turns critical, and a quiet withdrawal begins, either slowly like a receding tide, or abruptly like a slammed door. Having witnessed this pattern repeat, you can no longer believe in the permanence of love. You see it for what it is, a temporary storm of emotion, intense and convincing while it lasts, but destined to eventually fade into silence. Leaving you alone in the quiet aftermath, this understanding cultivates a stoic detachment that becomes your greatest shield. You no longer frantically chase the butterflies of initial infatuation or lose sleep deciphering mixed signals. You become an observer. You let her actions, not her words, do the talking. You allow her patterns to reveal her character over time, and you quietly, calmly decide what role, if any, she deserves to play in the life you have built for yourself. Paradoxically, this very detachment, this refusal to be emotionally manipulated, makes you intensely attractive. Women are instinctively drawn to a man they cannot easily control, whose sense of self is not hinged on their approval. Yet this armor, while it protects you from devastation, carries a heavy cost. The reckless passion, the intoxicating highs of losing yourself completely in another person. The blissful surrender of blind love, these are now inaccessible to you. You are safe, yes, anchored firmly to the ground of your own self-worth, but you are also forever grounded, unable to soar into those dizzying, unpredictable heights of passion that once defined the experience of love. You have traded ecstasy for stability, and while it is the wiser choice, the ghost of what you lost will always linger. The final stage of this journey is not a destination of bitterness, but one of sober sovereignty. You have passed through the fire of disillusionment and have not been burned to ash, but tempered into something stronger and more resilient. The trade is absolute. You have surrendered the intoxicating magic of innocence for the unshakable clarity of truth. You can no longer love with the blind, reckless abandon of your youth, but in its place, you have gained something more valuable and enduring, a profound and personal freedom. This is freedom from the heartbreak that once leveled you, freedom from the emotional manipulation of withdrawal and reward, and freedom from the destructive power of illusions that were never meant to last. You are no longer a slave to a narrative you did not write. With this freedom comes necessary and mature redefinition of love itself. You cease seeking fairy tales and instead seek alignment, a meeting of values, purpose, and character. You stop demanding a impossible permanence and start valuing a more realistic and meaningful consistency in action and integrity. The craving for dramatic fireworks is replaced by a deeper yearning for a lasting and quiet peace. When you are fortunate enough to find a woman who can meet you in this clear-eyed reality, the connection is different. You do not idolize her, placing her on a pedestal from which she must inevitably fall, nor do you dismiss her, armored by cynicism. You see her with clear vision, her flaws, her complexities, her humanity, and with full awareness of her conditional nature, you still consciously choose to share your journey with her. This love may lack the dizzying highs of youthful passion, but it possesses a depth and stability that fleeting emotion can never provide. The ultimate power of this, Hard-won understanding is that it forces you to stop outsourcing your happiness and stability to another person. You are compelled to build a life that is whole, purposeful, and resilient entirely on its own terms. Your validation, your mission, and your peace become internally generated. You become sovereign, the king of your own inner world. This sovereignty is what makes you truly powerful and ironically deeply attractive. You are a man who cannot be broken by a withdrawal of affection, because your worth was never for her to give. You cannot be controlled by the promise of love, because you are already complete. Love is thus dethroned as the ultimate goal of your existence. It is no longer the prize, but a potential complement to the life you have already masterfully built. And in that final quiet balance, you find a peace that no fleeting emotion or changing heart can ever threaten. You remain whole, with or without it, and that self-possession is the highest power a man can ever achieve.